Long ago, in a tranquil valley tucked away in the lush hills of ancient China, there lay a small village of tightly woven lives and whispered stories. Its people lived simple, harmonious lives, attuned to the rhythm of the seasons and the gentle whispers of autumn winds. Among them was a farmer named Sai, known not for wealth or power, but for his quiet wisdom and unshakable calm. Sai's home was a modest wooden hut with a thatched roof, standing by the edge of the village. His days were spent tilling his field, tending to his single horse, and sharing quiet moments with his son, a young man full of energy and hope. Despite his modest means, Sai carried an aura of contentment, as if he understood a secret that the others did not. One crisp autumn morning, the village awoke to an unpleasant event. Sai's only horse, a sturdy and trusted animal he relied on to plough his fields, had somehow broken free during the night and vanished into the hills. The news spread quickly, as it always did in the village, and by evening a small crowd had gathered outside Sai's home. "What terrible misfortune!" the neighbors cried, their faces etched with sympathy. Sai emerged from his home, his hands folded behind his back. His expression was serene, his eyes thoughtful. Stroking his grey beard, he replied with a single word: "Maybe." The villagers exchanged puzzled looks. Maybe. How could he say such a thing? Losing his only horse was clearly a disaster. Yet, they respected Sai's wisdom and left, muttering among themselves about his peculiar response. But the valley had its own way of surprising even the most skeptical. The very next day, as the sun painted the hills in hues of amber and gold, the sound of thundering hooves echoed through the village. Sai's horse had returned, and it wasn't alone. 7 wild horses followed it, their manes gleaming in the sunlight like strands of silk. Word of this miraculous event spread like wildfire, and soon the neighbors were back, their voices now brimming with awe. "What incredible fortune!" they exclaimed, their faces alight with wonder. Sai stood by the gate, gazing at the horses with quiet appreciation. Once again, he stroked his beard and replied, "Maybe." The neighbors stared at him, baffled. How could he remain so indifferent? 7 wild horses were a gift beyond measure, a windfall that could elevate his status and secure his and his son's future. Yet, as always, Sai's calm remained unshaken. The days that followed were filled with the spirited energy of taming the horses. Sai's son, eager and determined, decided to take on the challenge himself. One morning, as the air carried the earthy scent of fallen leaves, the young man mounted one of the wild horses. The animal bucked and reared, refusing to be subdued. In a sudden, violent motion, it threw him off, sending him crashing to the ground. The villagers rushed to the scene, their faces now painted with worry and dismay. The boy lay on the ground, his leg twisted unnaturally. The village healer was summoned, and soon the young man was confined to a wooden bench outside their home, his leg bound tightly in splints. That evening, as the warm glow of lanterns lit the village, the neighbors once again gathered at Sai's doorstep. "What a tragedy," they sighed, shaking their heads. Sai, seated calmly by his son, looked up at them, and with his usual composure, replied, "Maybe." The villagers, now familiar with his enigmatic responses, said no more. But they left, whispering among themselves about the farmer's peculiar detachment from misfortune. Days turned into weeks, and as the crispness of autumn deepened, a shadow fell over the village. Imperial officers arrived, their dark armor glinting under the waning sun. They carried a decree from the emperor. Due to the rebellion in the north, all able-bodied young men were to be conscripted into the army. The villagers watched with heavy hearts as their sons were taken away, many likely never to return. The officers approached Sai's home, their heavy boots crunching against the fallen leaves. They looked at his son, seated with his legs still bound in splints. After a brief inspection, they turned and walked away, waving dismissively. The villagers, surprised once again by the sudden turn of good fortune, came to Sai that evening. Their faces, lined with awe and subtle signs of envy, glowed in the light of the setting sun. "What a blessing," they said, nodding and smiling. Sai, sitting cross-legged on his porch, simply smiled. His eyes reflected the wisdom of countless seasons as he uttered the familiar refrain, "Maybe." And so life in the village continued its ebb and flow, each day bringing new joys and sorrows. Over time, the villagers began to see the truth in Sai's words. Events they had once celebrated often brought unforeseen challenges, while misfortunes sometimes bore unexpected blessings. Sai's wisdom lay not in predicting the future, but in his profound understanding of its unpredictability. He knew that life was a tapestry, its threads interwoven with moments of joy and sorrow, none standing alone, but all contributing to a greater whole. His story became a life lesson, passed down through generations, a timeless reminder of patience and perspective. The next time life surprises you, whether with joy or misfortune, remember Sai. His wisdom reminds us not to rush to judgment, for the story of any moment is rarely complete. Perhaps, like the farmer, we too can find peace in the ever-changing tides of life.